Hello and good morning and welcome to the Spangled Sit Down. I am your host, Bobby Adelson Jr., U.S. Embassy Kingston's Public Affairs Officer, and we're very excited to have you here with us live today. Back in June, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken appointed the State Department's first ever Special Representative for Racial Equity and Justice, Desiree Cormier Smith, who is our special guest today. Welcome to the show, Special Representative.
Thank you, Bobby. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So for those of you who are watching at home, please send in your comments, send in your questions, and if we have time, we'll be able to pull some of those up. Special Representative, the creation of this historic position is a step forward in our continued efforts to advance a more equitable, just and inclusive global society. So tell us, what are some of the mandates for you and your team in this role?
Yeah, well, the mandates are pretty much twofold. One is to ensure that U.S. foreign policy is promoting and advancing the human rights of members of marginalized racial and ethnic communities, including indigenous communities. And I do not use the term minorities, although a lot of people like to use that term because frankly, in many places, we are the majority. And in a place like, say, South Africa, Black South Africans are the majority, but are still overrepresented in some of the lower economic socioeconomic statuses. They're underrepresented in high-level positions in the private sector, as well as other segments of the society. So it's very important for me to clarify why I use the term marginalized racial and ethnic communities. The other aspect of my mandate is to ensure that U.S. foreign policy serves to combat racism, discrimination, and xenophobia. My appointment very much should be seen as a sort of further step in our commitment to advance a more just world, a more equitable world, and a freer world for everyone, with an acknowledgement that people, because of who they are, frankly, have been marginalized and continue to be marginalized. So my appointment sort of completes the roster of special representatives and offices at the State Department that are ensuring that our foreign policy serves for those who are most marginalized. That includes the Secretary's Office for Global Women's Issues. It includes an ambassador at large for international religious freedoms. It includes a special envoy for the rights of LGBTQI+ persons. It includes a special advisor for international disability rights, as well as an ambassador to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Bobby, are you still there, or should I keep talking? I think we may have lost Bobby.
Hello, Desiree. We had a Wi-Fi shutdown in our entire building right here at the embassy, and had no way to get in contact with you. Apologies.
I don't know if it was some kind of prank or practical joke going on.
I know we're good friends. I would never prank you like that, though. No, our internet went down in the entire building, but I believe we are back up.
Okay, great.
Apologies, Special Representative. I didn't catch where you cut off.
It's okay. I was just mentioning that my position is a part of a sort of several other positions in the State Department that exist to ensure that we are advancing a world that is more equitable, more just, and more free for all people in societies, regardless of their religion, of their gender identity or sexual orientation, of their disability status, or their religion. Now we are making sure that we are also ensuring that everyone is free to live up to their full potential, regardless of their race or ethnicity, which we all acknowledge. The sad reality is um, that is not the case for many people. So it's us just trying to live up to the basic premise in the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights that all people are born free and equal in dignity, and making sure that that's a reality for everyone, again, regardless of their identity.
So tell us.
Okay, good. I thought I was afraid I lost you again.
We hope we're here.
Okay.
So tell us, your position isn't the only new position that was created recently under this administration. So back in April, Secretary Blinken also announced the creation of the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Can you tell folks who might not know the difference between those two positions what they are?
Yeah, and that's a good question, an important question. So the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, which was actually appointed last April, so April 2021, is really focused on our internal workforce issues and making sure that the State Department and its workforce, its employees, reflect the rich diversity of the American people. My job is to make sure that our policies are confronting and addressing systemic racism, discrimination, and xenophobia. The other important distinction that I want to underscore is that when we say diversity or we say equity, we say inclusion, that is broader than just racial and ethnic inclusion and diversity and equity, which is what I am singularly focused on. I am focused on racial and ethnic equity. The Chief Diversity Officer, again, is focused on our workforce and making sure the State Department looks like America. That includes racial and ethnic diversity, but it also includes gender diversity. It includes LGBTQI plus diversity. It includes persons with disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So very different mandates, but obviously complementary because, to the extent that we have a State Department that looks like America, the belief is because of those lived experiences, we will sort of naturally have policies that serve to advance the equality and inclusion of people from marginalized backgrounds.
So, Special Representative, I've known you for quite a while, and I understand that this topic is something personal to you. So can you tell our viewers a little bit about your background, a little bit about yourself, and what led you to this role?
Sure. So I am the granddaughter of a civil rights activist. My grandfather was a very well-known writer, advocate, and activist in Los Angeles. He wrote a weekly column on the conditions of Black people for 30 years in Los Angeles's largest and oldest Black newspaper called The Sentinel. And so, growing up in his lap and under him, because I lived with him my entire childhood, I saw very intimately what it meant to advocate for equal rights and equal justice and why it was important that we do that. He was from the segregated South of America. He migrated from Louisiana to Los Angeles with his mother when he was a child to escape the sort of terror of segregation, right? But he moved to LA only to find segregation there too. And I remember as a child him telling me the stories of him integrating his high school and being the first Black student in his high school and having white parents and people from the neighborhood taunt him and say nasty things to him simply for trying to get his education, which, is a basic right. And so that, I think, sparked his passion and his interest in pursuing equal rights and specifically for Black people in America. And so, again, growing up under him, I was always constantly made aware of racial disparities in every aspect of society, in housing, and obviously the criminal justice system, in education, but not only just those inequities, but the solutions. And I saw how he was able to make a difference. And so when I left LA to go to college, I knew I wanted to dedicate my career and my life to public service. But I also had this interest in international affairs. And then I learned about a fellowship with the State Department that allowed me to begin my career as a Foreign Service officer and pursue my undergraduate degree as well as my master's degree. And so I was in the Foreign Service for several years and then decided to leave and join the private sector. Where I worked with major companies and foundations that were interested in investing in Southern and East Africa. And then I later joined civil society to sort of more closely follow in my grandfather's footsteps. This was after the murder of George Floyd. It was after my grandfather's death. And even though I always tried to infuse my own passion for racial justice into my work, no matter where I was, I wanted to be able to do it a little bit more loudly and a little bit more intensely. So I joined civil society and was an advocate for more just and humane and equitable U.S. foreign policy towards Africa and towards Europe and Eurasia, and was also starting to do some work to sort of highlight and combat anti-Black racism globally when I was asked to join the Biden-Harris administration in January of 2021. So in January of 2021, I rejoined the State Department as a senior advisor in the International Organization Affairs Bureau, where I got to lead our work on advancing racial justice issues through the UN. And that's a mouthful, but it basically was us engaging with other countries, including Jamaica, including other Caribbean countries and countries across the African continent at the UN, in both the UN General Assembly in New York and the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, on issues impacting people of African descent around the world, as well as other marginalized racial and ethnic communities. And as I was doing that, I saw the gap in our own State Department where we had sort of high-level envoys focused on other marginalized communities, but no one focused on marginalized racial and ethnic communities. And so I was able to advocate for the creation of this position. And then the secretary asked me to step into this position in June, and here I am.
Well, we're very happy that you're able to step into that position. Just last week, the United States joined others around the world in commemorating the International Day for People of African Descent. Of course, people of African descent are found all over the world, including upward of 150 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I wanted to pull up a question from one of our viewers right here in Jamaica. Where is she? So Miss Good basically says, hey, good morning. What exactly are you going to do to help? And I think she's referencing here in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a fair question. So the first thing that I want to make very clear is that my job is not to go around the world to admonish or lecture other governments about how they are treating members of marginalized racial and ethnic communities in their countries. We are starting with ourselves. Not only are we doing the hard work to address systemic racism here at home, and that is done by my colleagues in the domestic policy agencies, including at the White House, but we are also looking at how our foreign policy is either exacerbating racial inequities around the world, or where we could be doing a better job of lifting and supporting these communities through our own policies, programs, processes, and engagements. So what does that mean in practical terms, in real world? It means making sure that at all of our embassies and consulates around the world, not only are we engaging with members of marginalized racial and ethnic communities to listen to them and to learn from them on how we can better support and uplift them, but we are also taking a critical eye to our policies. Again, with the question of, and making sure we're asking ourselves these questions, right? Where are we doing a decent job? Where are we doing a good job of uplifting and supporting these communities based on their input and their recommendations and what they tell us their needs are? And then acknowledging the hard truth and where we are falling short. And that is critically important, because it's the other thing I want to dispel about my job is that my job is not to be a quote unquote voice for the voiceless. Members of marginalized racial and ethnic communities have agency. They have voices of their own, and they know better than anyone else what they need and what the challenges are that they face and what they need to overcome these challenges. The problem is that for far too long, they simply have been excluded from the rooms where decisions are being made that impact them. And so my goal, my hope is that I'm able to shift that and create a culture at the State Department where we really engage these communities and listen to them and take their input into consideration when we are crafting those policies. And this is critically important because every single issue, every single crisis that we're facing right now, whether it be food crises, or the climate crises, COVID recovery, the COVID pandemic, because it's still going on. They have a different and disproportionately harmful impact on members of marginalized racial and ethnic communities, particularly people of African descent and particularly indigenous peoples. And if we fail to acknowledge that disproportionate impact, our policies are going to be less impactful. So it really is starting with our own policies, and making sure that whatever we are doing in a country is serving to support and uplift these communities and creating more equitable and just societies for all people, regardless of their race or ethnicity. And again, I understand that that's a tall order. So I also am very clear-eyed about the fact that this work is not going to be easy, nor is it going to be quick. But that doesn't mean we don't do the work, right? But I hope that the work that I and my team are doing will have impact for years to come. And I hope that there will be some sort of quick wins, but I expect and I hope that the impact will be much more sustainable and long-term in the long run.
So we're running a little bit low on time, Special Representative. So I have one more question for you. What advice can you give to our Jamaican and Caribbean viewers who want to impact or might be interested in playing their own part in affecting their communities in their countries to achieve racial equity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would just start with a quote that has sort of been my guiding light and the reason why I'm so interested and passionate about this work. And it's a quote from Maya Angelou. And she said, "None of us is free until all of us are free." So even if you feel that you personally aren't impacted by systemic racism or discrimination because of the color of your skin, and you have to remember that we are part of a global community. And if the COVID-19 pandemic showed us nothing, it showed us the fact that our fates are interconnected. And so for that reason, it is in all of our interests to fight for a world that is more just and more equitable for all of us. Because when people of African descent, when indigenous peoples, when other marginalized groups are free to live up to their full potential without discrimination, without violence for simply being who they are, all of us are free. We've seen that societies that address deeply rooted inequities that are based on race or other identities, when they address these inequities, they tend to be more peaceful, more stable, and more prosperous. So that is not only good for the members of these marginalized racial and ethnic communities, but it is good for all of us. And so that is what I would encourage you to keep in mind.
Fantastic quote. Thank you so much, Desiree Cormier Smith, the Special Representative for Racial Equity and Justice. Thanks for sticking around through our technical difficulties.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Bobby.
We're so happy to have you on the program today and looking forward to what you'll be doing in your role. I'm very proud of you, by the way, just as a friend. And I think they chose the best possible person in the world for this role. So we're very, very excited for you.
Thank you, Bobby. That means a lot.
And thank you for everyone who tuned in today. You're watching the Star Spangled Sit Down. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time.